everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Bodacity Show. I'm Jeanette Anderson, your hostess with the mostest, and I'm here today with the beautiful and fabulous Leah Fink, who is from Calgary, my hometown. So welcome, Leah. I'm glad to see you. I'm leaving here tomorrow to go to Miami, so it's currently my hometown, but I'll be gone for a while. So welcome, and we're going to be talking about leadership today, how to be a better leader. And how do you create cultures that support you and other people in that process? I'm very happy to have you here because we haven't actually talked a lot about leadership on the show as of late. So I think it's a really important topic, whether you're an entrepreneur, an employee, or a corporate leader, or a thought leader, or in some other field, this will be relevant to you. So welcome. And I'm going to read you Leah's bio, and then we'll find out a little more about her. And we're going to launch right into how do we be a better leader? So Leah here we go. Okay, Leah Fink is highly sought after as a powerful facilitator, speaker, and author. By helping people develop their relationship skills, she makes sure they are having powerful positive impacts on those around them. Leah focuses on helping companies and individuals connect on a deeper level to what is important to them by teaching them communication, leadership, and empathy skills. Her methodology helps them create and maintain healthy relationships, feel inspired in their direction in life, super important, and have great mental resilience, even more important now. Awesome. That's a really good thing to help people with. So I'm glad you're here. So tell us a little bit about you that we wouldn't guess from that introduction, that we might not guess about you personally, that we wouldn't find on your website.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. I'm so excited to be speaking with you, and absolute pleasure. That's such I try to include lots on my website so people can get to know me, but you said interesting fact earlier, and let's say I really like circus. I really like doing like flying trapeze and aerial silks and trampoline and all sorts of stuff like that. So there's an interesting thing. I'm a very exploratory physical person. I love doing that kind of stuff.
That's interesting. So you've done silks yourself.
Yes.
That's hard. That's really physically demanding. So congratulations. That's awesome. And you have to not be too scared of heights either to be able to do that. So and trapeze.
Well, if you want to come do the flying trapeze, you're in Calgary sometimes, we can.
They have all that in Calgary?
Yeah, it's outdoors.
I did not know that. That's very cool. Okay, cool. Yeah, maybe not, but I've done zip lining a lot and parapunting and high ropes courses and all that kind of stuff, but I don't know, trapezing could be fun. I don't know about the silk, so I don't think I have the body strength. Anyways, okay, so let's talk about leadership. So what got you interested in this in the first place? What's your why? Why do you do the work you do?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking. And my why is bigger than obviously just the leadership piece. And, if I look at like core purpose in my life, the why there is helping people know they're loved. And what that comes from, to go back a little bit in story, is, when I was younger, my brother's good friend committed suicide. And that was hugely impactful. And especially for me, maybe not knowing him as well, but seeing the impact through, my brother and family and friends and everything that was affected. And on the flip side of that tragedy, I actually had a couple instances in my professional life too, but in my personal life, where I was able to speak with people at a time when they were going through a really dark time and they decided to not choose suicide. And so that to me is like my biggest why, the biggest thing I'm proud of is having that impact. And I know that the only reason that happened in those cases was because I was able to foster that connection, that there was a strong relationship and trust that they could come to me. And that's not something you can do after the fact, right? This is why people need to develop these skills. And it's not just at the skill of like on an interpersonal level, like you and me, but this is something that ripples through our life. And that's why I talk about leadership, is as a leader, you're having an impact on all the people around you every time. All of your actions are going to have this ripple. And that ripple can have really good effects when you're coming from this grounded place of skillfulness in relationship and good communication, or it can have negative impacts that you don't even intend, right? And that's what often happens as leaders, right? We're trying really hard, we care a lot, but we don't end up having the impact that we want. And, the shoreline, when those ripples get out there, does become things like burnout. It mental illness, it becomes all these challenges we're facing. And so to me, it's really important to help people align to that piece. And that's how people know they're cared for.
Absolutely. So it comes down to really, you want people to be loved or feel loved. And whether that's in the workplace, outside the workplace, wherever that may be. Because we're leaders in our family, we're leaders in our community, we're different kinds of scenarios. And all of those places, probably people want their people to feel loved and know that they matter. So how did you what was your journey to working in leadership? How did you get to this work?
Yeah, well, I was super lucky. First of all, when I was a teenager, I got to start doing personal development courses. I don't think is maybe a usual teenage passion, but I absolutely loved them. And I decided that I wanted to do that. Of course, there's no, logical way to get there. There's no set path. And so I did some training in outdoor leadership so I could help people find experiences that really supported them, because that was important to me. And then I became a social worker as well, because I wanted to understand how people thought on a deep level. And because mental health was being talked about more, I wanted to understand that. So from that, I ended up working in addictions and mental health for actually quite a few years. There was a wilderness-based youth program.
Okay.
Yeah, it was an amazing program out in the Rockies, just outside of Calgary here. And I loved the stuff we were teaching these youth, because it really was these foundational skills that I don't see a lot of adults having, to be fair, as well. And what was really sad was, first of all, they'd gotten to this program. So they'd been using drugs. Some had lived on the street. Some had been selling drugs. They had criminal records, right? Like all these horrible impacts before they could get this fairly basic learning in some ways, right? Like really foundational learning. And then the other piece was we'd send these youth home and they would have done so much work on themselves. They would have done some family work, but so much of the burden was now on them. And they weren't really in a position of power in the family to be able to change some of the other things that were happening. And so when I started my own business, one of the things I wanted to do was look at, my own ripples. What ripples could I create and at what level? So when I work with business owners, when I work with entrepreneurs, the ripple isn't just that person who's going to do the work. It's their team. And then it's the larger picture of maybe the people who are working for that team and their families. And so that was really how I got to building my own business, working with leaders, was trying to see where I could create the biggest impact by teaching these skills.
Okay, cool. I love it. And it makes I can see the journey and how it would all one would lead to the other, Did you ever do Personal Best or the Creator's Code course?
No.
Oh, okay. I was wondering, because you look very familiar. So I was wondering, did I do one of your programs or did you do one of mine? I was facilitating those personal development courses for quite a long time in Calgary. Tell me what you think leadership means, because it's a big word, gets bandied around a lot. And some people may not think of themselves as leaders. So because they may think of it as a position as opposed to a way of being. So how do you define leadership?
Yeah, so and this is probably going to be a slightly different definition than a fair amount of people. And this actually comes from an amazing training I was able to do called The Right Use of Power with a woman down in the States called Cedar Barstow. It's phenomenal. You should look it up. And it really revolutionized my way of talking about things like leadership, because what she talks about and what I've really taken on trying to support people is understanding their power. And that is their influence in the world, their ability to change or stop change happening. And so when you take it from that, people think of leader as just this specific positional thing. So maybe some entrepreneurs are listening and going, well, I don't have a staff team, so I'm not a leader. Or you don't think of leadership necessarily as parenthood. But when you think of it as this power that is inherent in the roles we take on, and some of the statuses we have in society, some of those privilege pieces, it's really just people who are able to have this influence on others in any way. So you're an entrepreneur, a client comes to you, you have an influence over their life. You are helping them maybe figure themselves out as a coach. You are helping advise them financially as a financial advisor, whatever it is. You are now having a say in this person's life in some ways more than they have. And of course, that's obvious in something like a work situation where there's a boss and there's staff under them, right? And so leadership is really about, to me, understanding what that power is, the range of its influence, and then what true responsibility with power is, what that means and how you can use it. So everything works well, you have great relationships, and it's really bringing you the success you want.
Cool. Okay, so the thing, oh, I wrote it out, but then I refreshed and lost it. I'm looking over here at us on this other screen. What I heard, or what that definition as, is understanding and using power to influence others. That leadership is understanding and using power to influence others. Is that how you would define it?
Yeah, it's understanding your own power on multiple levels, and then using that to create the influence you want in the world, to have the impact that you want. Could involve influencing others, influencing the environment. I mean, system changes. There's a whole bunch of pieces to it.
Okay, I love it. Okay, so I put that definition in there because I think that is a really cool and different definition. And you're right, it can be applied in anything, in our advocacy for the environment, in showing up in a church group and whatever that may be. So you mentioned for entrepreneurs, the influencing, for instance, prospective clients, etc. How do we be better leaders? How do we do that better?
Yeah, it's such an easy question, right? Just
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
and the piece with that, and the reason I'm kind of joking that is it is a big gray answer, right? There is no one size fits all. And actually, if anything, I think that's one of the challenges with how we think about leadership in today's society. It's very individualistic. People have like the right way to lead, but really what it is about is cultivating relationship. And so when I have a client coming to me, there's a couple things I can do. First thing is, I want to pick up on their cues and try to match them in what makes them most comfortable. So when you think about leadership, if you think of a time, for example, when you had less power, so that could have been when you were a kid and your parents had a big say on your life. It could be as a student and there's a teacher. It could be when you were a staff member to a boss. But think about how uncomfortable that is. Entrepreneurs don't always get this because now you own your own company, you're the boss, you're going around, and you forget how scary it can be to approach someone who has that influence. Right? There's this vulnerability. So if I'm say going to a financial advisor, I've got to share very personal details. I have this fear that they might judge me because I don't know as much as them, right? They have a huge influence there. But people don't often recognize that vulnerability. We think, oh, well, the client should match me. Or there's a piece of, well, I know what I'm doing. And so if I put this out there, the client will like it. And really what we want to do is we want to be the most responsive. So if you meet someone who's very relational, how relational can you be and meet them in that place of what they're looking for? If you meet someone who's very analytical, can you switch over? It's like a spectrum of behavior. Can you move yourself to this space where you are making them the most comfortable possible, where you are kind of responsible for creating this healthy relationship between the two of you? And as much as everyone's probably listening to this going like, well, yeah, duh. I will say just about everyone I've ever met is not as good as they think they are, because we have habits. We have our way of doing things. We think it's the best way. I'm sure I'm included in this category. I'm trying to be conscious, doing my best, but of course we have habits. And so it's really working and saying like, is what I'm doing right now serving them best?
Yes. Well, we come from our style, right? So if you're an analyzer, then you're analytical with people. If you're a controlling style, or depending on which personality system you're using, or a promoter, then you're going to come from that perspective. So really it's paying attention. What is their style? Matching that, reflecting it, mirroring it, or at least being relatable in that style or that way of being, so that you can communicate and connect with them. Because it's kind of like giving gifts we want to give, or we want to receive. That's what most people do with their style, is they're being who they think they want to be or should be, versus being with the other person. So you mentioned a couple of types, analytical and relational. Is there a personality system that you use or advocate, because you've explored lots of different tools? I use social styles a lot. I've looked at DISC and Myers-Briggs and yada yada yada. There's a million, but I find social styles fairly simple and relatable. Is there one that you use a lot or that you recommend?
So I use and facilitate True Colors.
Okay.
It's one of the older ones, 76. And what I like about it, because I'm one of my main strengths is that analytical, and they have a lot of research backing them up, right? And so they've done this with millions of people and had great results and have a bunch of resources. So I agree with you. It's simplicity is really helpful. Keep it simple, use a couple tips and tricks. And then also the piece that sometimes people can also get caught in is becoming really weirdly rigid in this, right? Because it is a way to get a sense of people and start to think, okay, well, I'm getting this sense, so I'll probably start addressing them like this, but then also checking your assumptions and, doing that, getting feedback and really tracking for that impact. Is it actually working, or did I start going too far? Right.
So what is a way in terms of, so for instance, for entrepreneurs or smaller business owners, small to mid-sized business owners, what is a way of knowing better how we impact people? Because one of the things is that we don't know. We're often in a vacuum around that. So what do you advocate that for being able to see what is our influence? What is our style? What is our impact?
Yeah, well, that's a phenomenal question. And that is really the heart of all of this, isn't it? Is I can make a million assumptions. I could say, oh, she just smiled at me. She nodded. That must mean she's the happiest she's ever been and perfect. Or maybe going the other way and I'm going, oh, that didn't look like a real smile. I'm doing things wrong, right? I could make all these, but what you really need to do is ask.
Yeah.
And it's daunting. It's not comfortable. People have really negative experiences generally with feedback, right? So like I've asked a boss for feedback and they cut me down and they used it to insult me. And really reframing this piece as feedback's an investment in relationship. So you can invest in your relationships by saying, hey, there's something that's not working for me. And I recommend everyone does this in all their personal and professional relationships. But you can also very intentionally, because you're this person with more power and there's that other person's vulnerable, you need to ask them. Because how hard is it to come to that person who has the say over your life and say, hey, this isn't working.
Right.
So really, it could be a really simple check-in. It could be something like, if you're talking to a client, for example, what was the thing that I did that helped you most in this last period of time? Is there anything, or could you name one specific thing helps that I could do that would help improve our relationship, our connection, my work for you, whatever it is? And they might not do it the first time because there's still this trust building and, are you a safe person to say something maybe that's contrary to? But if you ask this a couple times and genuinely take that information, it doesn't mean you have to use it exactly. If they say, I would like you to call me 10 times a week, that would really help our relationship. And you're going, that's not, but then you acknowledge it. You get to say, oh, something's happening that you feel we need to connect more. Can you tell me more about that? Okay, I can't call you 10 times a week, but I do hear you want more communication. How's this? And it creates that dialogue and gets us away from all those assumptions of what we think might be happening.
Exactly. Yeah, that's great. One of the things I do at the end of every coaching call is either what worked for you or what didn't work for you in this call. What was your greatest value or takeaway? What's the value you created? How did this call work for you? Anything like that. But then also followed up with an automated email that goes out every time that says, do you have any feedback, or is it any other things that came up afterwards? Because sometimes they can give you feedback in the moment and sometimes they can't. So checking back at various points also really helps. Let's talk a bit about culture, because you're a culture consultant and you do a lot of work with companies around culture. A lot of smaller business owners or small to mid-sized business owners or entrepreneurs may not think a lot about culture. They may not think they have a culture, but I do. I have subcontractors and there's absolutely a culture with them. How do we think about culture? And then how do we, so that's question one. Question two is, how do we consciously create culture?
Those are both fantastic questions. And you've hit on something too, which I would really hope that entrepreneurs out there hear is, I've unfortunately met a lot of businesses that started out as solopreneurs and they finally got to the point where they got to hire staff, they got to hire subcontractors, and they're so used to being everything and doing everything that they're still so focused on the tasks of the business and they forget this piece of culture. Right. And honestly, if there's 3 of you and you all joined together because you all got along so well and it was so natural, what happens now when that 4th person comes in, or suddenly you're a 10-person business? Culture isn't something that you can just stumble into especially as you start getting more people. It has to be intentionally talked about. And culture really is it's at a very basic level, it's an agreement of what's important to you and how you're going to move towards that. So your family has a culture, your sports teams have a culture, right? And you have these maybe preset goals that are a little bit more obvious there. And so you need to make sure that your work has those. So, when we talk about vision and mission is a really interesting one, because almost all companies have some sort of vision or mission. Most of them are little plaques on the wall and they look at them once in a while and smile and go, yeah, that sounds right.
Yep.
But what does that actually mean? How do you live that? This is one of the biggest things. I know we talked a little bit about quiet quitting before, and
Mhm.
quiet quitting is often people who don't feel connected to what's happening. They don't feel appreciated, and they don't feel like what they do has any larger impact to what's important to them. And so having just even a conversation with your team about what the vision and mission are, what those inherent values are, and what people. So if you were on my team talking to you about what your values are, okay, well, great. How does that work within that context? And now we can support each other on a level that's not just what tasks are you going to do for the business, and then what tasks am I going to do for the business, and we're all just sitting here typing away or whatever, right? It's that kind of stuff that really starts forming the meaningful culture to companies.
So so let's really break it down though. Culture is what? Culture is communication, culture is the environment, culture is the physical environment, culture is like how do we touch culture? Where does it live? What is it that makes up a culture?
Yeah. Where do we touch culture? It's interesting because culture is the water in which we swim.
Mm.
And so it is often hard to think of like touching it and seeing it, because so much of it is that, again, that kind of maybe subconscious patterns, habits of being. And but it is made up of all of those pieces. Any sort of interaction you're having between people is part of culture. So communication, of course, is part of that. Conflict resolution, but of course, healthy conflict is a great part of culture, right? I work with a lot of companies that have false harmony. Again, there's these vulnerable people, it's the boss. The boss says something, you disagree, but you go, yeah, that's great. Suddenly everyone leaves. The boss is like, what's happening? I thought everyone was so happy. And so it is so many components that's hard to say. And like I said, some of it does come more naturally to people. I've met companies where maybe one component's really good. They've been pretty strong. They did actually have a strong vision and mission, and people feel like they live their values, but maybe their communication is just not great. They can talk again, maybe about the task-oriented stuff, but as soon as you say conflict, or as soon as that starts happening, you find out that, oh, everyone's just doing backroom chats. Right. They talk here in the meeting and then they go back here. And this can happen with clients too. You can have a culture with your clients, right? That come in and they get this vibe of, well, how did we communicate? And what does that look like? And you don't want your clients, 100%, you don't want your clients going out the door and talking to each other outside and going, that person sucks.
Yeah, for sure.
Or they don't communicate well. I don't want to deal with this. So it's hard to define that concisely without going into all of these different layers that can happen.
Right. So yeah, and I totally get that. And there's so many different components to it. As a leader, let's say that you're in a business and you're starting and you've got maybe some subcontractors, you might have a VA, you're starting to put staff in place, or you might have, 3 to 5 employees or 10 or whatever. When you're starting to do that and move in the direction of having not just you and your dog in your business, as a leader, what's the thing that we kind of need to first think about in terms of setting or creating a culture? So what are some of the things that helps us actually consciously create that culture?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll actually, so some of the work I do, I co-collaborate with a group called the Ally Co. And they have a great guide for it, which I've now started using myself, called the Me to We. And this is the simplest thing you can do right from the beginning. You get a new staff. It's half an hour of your life, and half an hour can save you so much down the road. So really simple. You can talk about what are your values, what are your goals, what's important to you, basically. One little quadrant. Then you can talk about what builds trust for you. And you think it's pretty obvious. Again, you go, oh, the same thing builds trust for everyone. No, it doesn't. For some people, it's that individual one-on-one communication. For some people, it's positive acknowledgement. It's like your love languages, right? Different things build trust for different people. Then you start thinking of the other pieces, which is, what are the situations before that have not gone well? What did I contribute? What did they contribute? You want to know about that. And it's not anyone's fault. It's not saying this is going to be a bad employee or you're a bad manager. It's saying how did this not work out before? And then what breaks trust? And even knowing just those 4 things really quickly about someone, like I said, this could be, go think about it for a while, have a half-hour conversation. Suddenly I know so much differently how to interact with you. And I get to stop making some of those assumptions. And just even knowing, for example, let's say you're a person that really appreciates verbal acknowledgement. if once a week I go, oh yeah, Jeanette wants verbal acknowledgement, I can come and I could say, you know what, I really appreciated the detail you put into that last report.
Mhm,
Or I saw you just have this amazing interaction with a client. We want to be specific, right?
mhm,
And I just want to say that looked so good.
mhm, mhm,
Now, every week, I'm reinforcing something about our relationship that you care about.
mhm,
Instead of something that I've assumed you care about. And like you said, giving the gift you want to receive. Maybe
mhm,
I'm trying so hard to give you all these great things and you're just sitting there like, okay, that's nice, but it's not
mhm.
having that impact on you. And so just starting that conversation is a really good place to begin.
I love that. Okay, so let me just make sure I got it all over here.
Yeah.
Share with your team members or staff or stakeholders or employees or clients. What are your values? What helps you build trust? What breaks trust? And what hasn't worked for you before? Did I get the fourth one? Okay, great. Awesome. It eliminates assumptions and really builds connection. So I think that's a great idea. So part of the practical action step here would be create that as a process, write that stuff down, have it be part of your onboarding conversation with anybody that you bring on, whether it's a full-time employee, a partner, or a part-time VA. Have that conversation with them and really communicate what's their side of that.
Yeah.
And be mindful of, because I'm going back to my previous mistakes in this, be mindful of they're going to say what they want you, what they think you want to hear.
Yeah.
So you have to really create a safe environment to have an honest conversation around what do you really want? What are your true values? Do you agree with this? Versus them just smiling and nodding and saying yes, for sure. And particularly, I find that with some foreign cultures, there are cultures like in India and the Philippines and the Pacific Rim where it's not okay to say no. It's not okay to say I don't agree. And so they smile and they nod and they say yes, no matter what. So you really have to check more than once. Is that a real yes, or is that a cultural yes? And that's understanding culture on top of culture, right?
Well,
Geographic culture too.
yeah, well, and you've hit on two beautiful points, because yes, geographical culture or just even personal culture, right? You don't know this person's background, where they came from, is a huge piece. So, and that's why this getting to know you process does matter, because it does get rid of some of those, oh, this person's, they don't care because they're not sharing this with me, or they won't say no, or maybe it matters differently to them. And that's one of the reasons too that I like that piece of just talking about values and goals at the beginning. Might be a much easier question than what breaks trust, because yeah, that could be a little bit harder to do, but people generally can get a sense when someone shares their values, their goals. It's what's important to them. And from that, you can ask some better questions. And this piece of psychological safety, this is the other reason that I really encourage entrepreneurs to get into this early, is because once again, I've unfortunately met people who didn't start with this piece and they didn't create psychological safety. So now they're trying to go back and fix that mistake. And it's much harder to build trust from the beginning than it is to fix broken trust. We know that, right?
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
after that bad thing happened, you don't want to continue.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it takes a lot more to rebuild trust. So tell us a little bit more about how people can get in touch with you and follow up with you. And you've got a gift for people to support them with this question and how to become a better leader. So tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, so people can go to meetleah.ca, meatleah.ca, and they can book a consultation call. And that's really my best way to get to know people. And it's the best way I can help you. Like I said, I have seen a lot of leadership programs that say, do these 5 things and you'll be a perfect leader. I think it's a lot more individual than that. It has cultural context. It has all of these different pieces. And I just want to be able to help people. Like I said, the ripples I want are getting better mental health for people, getting rid of burnout, all of those pieces. And in that conversation, we can chat and I could give you something to take away and you can use that with your team right away.
Okay, so that's really about how to improve your leadership, or where are you at with regards to that, and how do we up that or increase that, or even just support you in some of the challenges that you're having, perhaps with difficult communication, or being able to deal with some of the stress and strain that people are under right now, especially with all the stuff that's been going on. So, because I think that's a big part of how culture has changed, is now what? Who are we now that we're not?
Yep.
in the midst of that, in the midst of the pandemic, even though we still are, and who are we when we're not who we used to be, as leaders, as cultures, as organizations. So I think it's a really important time to stop, pause, and check in. What do I think a leader is now? How do I live into that in my family, in my community, my business, etc. And like most things, that's typically something that we're kind of on the end of our nose. We can't see very easily. That's why it's great to reach out to someone like Leah and have that conversation so we can pull it back and look at it and go, oh, okay, yeah, here's where my blind spot is, or here's what I want to create more of. So awesome, awesome work. And I think that, like you said, I don't know if it's in your marketing or if you said it, but it's something about creating the ripples as they ripple out from us as leaders to others. It has a kind of an exponential effect in terms of how it impacts people. So important to consider. All right. So so go in. I did put it there. Meet Leah. And that's leah.ca for Canada. And you can connect with her and have a connection call about your leadership, any challenges you may be having, what you want more of, etc. All right. So, obviously you can find out more about you there. And so what's one last thing you'd like to leave everyone with when they're thinking about leadership?
Yeah. I think the big thing is kind of a be kind to yourself, because I still have yet to meet a leader in any capacity who wanted to be a bad leader, that went to work with the intention being like, I want to make my employees cry. I'm going to, do a horrible job. That doesn't happen. We all have really good intentions. And the hard piece about this work and stepping into it is you have to realize that maybe some of those good intentions didn't work out how you thought. And that sucks and it's painful. And getting past it means you can have the impact you want. And so really encouraging people to just both be kind with what you did before and also embrace that way that things could be is just huge.
Great advice. I love both sides of that. And I think that's very true, because we can be very hard on ourselves. And hindsight is 50-50. Whatever it does. So hindsight is 100%, whatever it is. Yeah, 2020. That's it. Hindsight is 2020. So yeah, it is really being compassionate. And now what? The now what piece around how am I going to go ahead and fix that or change that? Thank you so much for being here, Leah. Thank you for the work that you do to support people in being more of the kind of leader they want to be. And I think obviously the world needs a lot of really strong, powerful, compassionate, thoughtful leaders that are supported in being that on an ongoing basis. So thank you for the work that you do. Appreciate you. All right, everybody. So have a wonderful week, and let's really focus on how can you be a better leader this week. Take care, be bodacious, and we'll see you soon. Bye for now.